debate. I recognize the honourable member for South Kirk-Interlake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad to join in on today's debate on the question of privilege and the violation of parliamentary privilege by the Liberal government in refusals to produce documents as it relates to the SDTC scandal. Now, we know, and I'll just do a quick recap for those that are just tuning in. We know that the government has taken the Sustainable Development Technology Canada and turned it into a green slush fund for Liberal insiders and friends. The Auditor General did a complete investigation on the governance of SDTC because a whistleblower had come forward. And she found over $390 million worth of contracts were given inappropriately by the Board of Directors, who all had multiple conflicts of interest. Now, SDTC is a Crown corporation. It's funded fully by the taxpayers of Canada, and every person that serves on that board of directors, including its CEO, is appointed by this government. The Liberal Minister of Industry individually appoints through order in council all of those directors. It should be noted, and as a former chair of the Environment Committee who worked closely with SDTC, that the committee, or that organization, had worked perfectly until 2017. In 2017, the former Minister of Industry, Navdeep Bains, who is no longer a member in this House, went and hired on with Rogers Corporation and making a pile of money doing that. He fired the existing chair and board of SDTC and loaded it up with Liberal friends and insiders, many of them who had already received grants through Sustainable Development Technology Canada. Now, when the Auditor General started doing her research, she found that there was $58 million. We're not talking pennies here. This makes ad scam look like nickel and dime stuff. This is $58 million were awarded on 10 ineligible projects. She found another $334 million on 186 cases of money that was given to projects in which the 9 board members actually had a conflict of interest and never recused themselves from the decision-making process. And that in $58 million worth of projects, almost $59 million worth of projects, that there was no contribution agreement or terms that were ever met. Now, the Auditor General made it clear that the failure of this is upon the Liberal Minister of Industry, who didn't follow through on his oversight and making sure that governance was followed. He turned a blind eye when they found out that they were actually handing out money to Liberal insiders. And we know that the Minister of the Environment was tied to Cycle Capital, one of the companies that was receiving grants from SDTC, and we know that there was actually a board member on that fund who was also with Cycle Capital, who said that his shares increased by 1,000% after receiving SDTC funding. 1,000%. And the Minister of Environment benefited as well. That is corruption at its core. We also know that yesterday, the RCMP opened up their investigation into the 9 directors identified by the Auditor General in the SDTC Green Slush Fund scandal. But should we at all be surprised by this, Mr. Speaker? You know, this is a Liberal government that has always been ethically challenged. It is scandal-plagued. And the Liberals have a culture of corruption. And all I have to do is go back, and I mentioned ad scam from 2000 to 2004. I was elected in 2004. And we were dealing with the ad scam fallout back then. But we've witnessed it going on and on as we move forward. You know, let's not forget SNC-Lavalin scandal in 2019, where the Prime Minister put pressure on his Justice Minister at the time, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to approve contracts to and also provide a pardon to SNC-Lavalin so that they can tender on and bid on government contracts again. She said no, and the Prime Minister fired Jody Wilson-Raybould because she wouldn't follow his word. She did her job as the Attorney General of Canada in making sure that the law was respected and that these individuals weren't given a free pass for their fraudulent activities in other countries and here in Canada. We know that the Prime Minister was found in violation by the Ethics Commissioner for putting undue pressure on Jody Wilson-Raybould. And of course, that wasn't the first time that he had been found in violation of our ethics rules. It was only the second time, but he's the first Prime Minister in history to actually face an ethics scandal. We look back on the WE scandal of 2020, and here we had the Liberals, again, trying to shovel money into the hands of their friends at the WE charity, over $500,000. Luckily, we were able to get that stopped. But we found out, again, Liberal insiders, including Bill Marneau, who, the former Minister of Finance, was actually tied directly back to the WE charity. His daughter worked for the WE charity, and he was in there advocating not recusing himself from decision-making processes. You look at all the foreign interference that has taken place in the blind eye that has been given by these Liberals on what's happening here. The Arrive Scan scam is another one that, again, we have millions and millions of dollars going in the pockets of two guys that we found out later that the ArriveCan app could have been set up for about $154 million. But no, we're talking $54 million plus that was used by these individuals to enrich themselves because they were tied directly to Liberal insiders. And let's not forget about the Winnipeg Lab documents in 2021. In 2020 it started. The House requested and ordered for the production of documents. The government stalled it and blocked it and even took the Speaker to court to try to stop the production of these documents that showed, when we did receive them finally this year, that the two scientists in question were actually operatives for the People's Liberation Army in Beijing, and that viruses were shipped to China, that intel on different vaccines were also shipped over to China, and who knows what other security breaches happened at the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg. And the Liberals were too scared to let the public see it. And they were so scared in 2021 that instead of providing those documents and having everything come out through the Supreme Court, they called an election. And that, of course, prorogued Parliament, and the process stopped. I think some of us over here would actually like these guys to, call an election now, so that we can have an election that stops the documents coming forward if that's what the Liberals want to do. And Canadians can make the decision on how badly they want to put the Liberals in the penalty box based upon their continued unethical behavior and corruption that they plague their government. Now, I've mentioned that there's been ongoing ethical violations by this government as well. The Prime Minister was found to be guilty for taking a private vacation on Billionaire Island and using unsanctioned aircraft. We know that Bill Marneau was found in the WE scandal, had to resign over it. We know that the Public Safety Minister has been found guilty by the Ethics Commissioner on 2 different occasions, including awarding family members clam contracts in one of the Crown corporations. He was also found guilty of having his sister-in-law, I believe it was, made as the interim ethics commissioner. Like, how is there any, unbiased there when they're family members? And we thank for interesting family gatherings like Christmas supper. And we also got the trade minister who went and gave her BFF, her campaign manager, contracts directly out of her department, out of her office, without tendering them out at all. And she was found in violation of the ethics rules. And now we have the Liberals obstructing our parliamentary process. They are also obstructing justice. Will they turn these documents over to the RCMP? I doubt it. They're going to claim some sort of cabinet secrecy. But, you know, we have to make sure that the rules of this place, our parliamentary procedure, our Constitution, our Charter, even the British North America Act, is respected. And that's the last thing that these Liberals are doing, Mr. Speaker. Now, they keep claiming, oh, well, this is all about charter rights. And I'll just repeat what the leader of the Conservative Party said yesterday. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is designed to protect the people from the government, not provide a cover for the government to hide documents from the people. And we have to recognize that the supremacy of our democratic institution, the Parliament of Canada, is the overall legislative body that writes the rules, that writes the laws, and directs our justice system, not the other way around. And the Liberals are always trying to tilt that discussion. So I just want to say this, that if you look at the rules, Standing Order 108(1)A, which gives the power to the House of Commons, to committees, to Parliament, to order the production of papers. And it, just to reiterate it right out of here, the House of Commons Procedures and Practice, 3rd edition, often we call it Bos Gagnon. And as we look at Chapter 3, page 137, and it says this about Parliament. It says the only limitations which could only be self-imposed would be that an inquiry should relate to the subject within the legislative competence of Parliament, particularly where witnesses and documents are required and the penal jurisdiction of Parliament is contemplated. This dovetails with the right of each House of Parliament to summon and compel the attendance of all persons within the limits of their jurisdiction. It goes on to say, the power to send for persons, papers, and records has been delegated by the House of Commons to its committees in the standing orders. It is well established that Parliament has the right to order any and all documents to be laid before it which it believes are necessary for its information. The power to call for persons, papers, and records is absolute. It's absolute. And the Liberals here continue to avoid, dither, delay, deflect, rather than comply with an order of the House. And then we know, Mr. Speaker, based upon the Speaker's decision, when he came to the conclusion that this is a prima facie question of privilege that has been established, and that's what we're in here debating today and have been all week. Because in it, he said, the procedural precedents and authorities are abundantly clear. The House has the undoubted right to order the production of any and all documents from any entity or individual it deems necessary to carry out its duties. And here we have a majority of duly elected honorable members from across the country that are calling on the government to deliver. And I wonder if we're going to see the Liberals go and try to block this process again, either by taking the Speaker back to court because they do not respect Parliament, or are they going to prorogue and stop all processes again? Possibly. That's something that we're all wondering about. Or if they really think that this should be something that the people of Canada should have a say on, let's call an election. And then we can talk about things like the carbon tax and how it's impacting and hurting Canadians from coast to coast to coast. We can talk about how their out-of-control policies and hug-a-thug have created crime and chaos on our streets, the worst that we've ever seen. We can talk about how the housing crisis is making it impossible for young Canadians to achieve the Canadian dream of owning their own home. And we can talk about how the reckless spending is breaking our country, driving up inflation, and hurting employment right across this country. Never mind productivity is on the downturn, that we are now making 50% less, or the Americans are making 50% more than we are. That to me is troubling, to say the least, because when they came to power, the financial situation in this country was strong. Canadians were making more money in the middle class than what Americans were, and now we have fallen so far back because of the uncreative and negating policies that have hurt Canadians all over our country. Now, we know that when you look at some of these situations, and I just got to find my papers here, this all came to light because of a whistleblower who's been at committee, and I just want to read some of their quotes onto the record here. And this one, I think, is a couple here that are really important. It says, first of all, the true failure of the situation stands at the feet of our current government, whose decision to protect wrongdoers and cover up their findings over the last 12 months is a serious indictment of how our democratic systems and institutions are being corrupted by political interference. By the Liberals themselves, Mr. Speaker, and we hear it here all the time, that they are not at all trying to comply with the Auditor General report or what the Industry Committee has said. They have not tried to comply with this order to produce the papers that are so necessary in getting down to the bottom of what happened here and how their friends and Liberal insiders are getting rich while the rest of us continue to get poorer. It goes on to say, I think the current government is more interested in protecting themselves and protecting the situation being a public nightmare, and they'd rather protect the wrongdoers and financial mismanagement than have to deal with a situation like this SDTC and the public sphere. So again, instead of bringing this out in the open, we want to talk about transparency. We know that sunlight is the best disinfectant, so let the sun shine in. We'll open up the louvers, maybe we can get it down here and we'll actually have some actual truth and honesty coming from this Liberal government. So, Madam Speaker, I look at this and the whistleblower goes on. I know the federal government, like the minister, has continued saying there was no criminal intent and nothing was found, but I think the committee would agree that they're not to be trusted on the situation. I would happily agree to whatever the findings are by the RCMP, but I would say that I wouldn't trust that there isn't any criminality unless the RCMP is given full authority to investigate. And as we know now, the RCMP is going to do their job and going to get down to the bottom of this. When you look at this scandal, SDTC had their hands on about $100 million a year of taxpayer money to hand out to help new startup organizations, companies, bring in new sustainable type projects, new technologies, and help Canadians with bringing in some of these new technologies to deal with everything from wastewater to greenhouse gas emissions to new software programs that will help reduce waste in our homes. And yet, because of the political interference that we saw from Navdeep Bains when he was Minister of Industry, by the Order in Council appointments that were made through him by this Prime Minister and his Liberal cabinet, that we're seeing individuals come in and ultimately enrich themselves. The key problem in all this is that the SDTC executives, when they were put in as Liberal insiders, decided instead of helping out other companies, they decided to enrich themselves. They decided to help their own companies and grant themselves their own government funds, which is a complete violation and criminality of proper governance. And the Minister of Industry decided to willfully turn a blind eye, and the Liberals have been trying to cover this up ever since. So, Madam Speaker, I don't think any of us are surprised that we're here again, having to try to convince the government to come clean, to produce the documents, allow Parliament to do its work that it's elected to do, and for them to be held to account. Anything else that we're seeing here is simply called a cover-up.
Questions?